Welcome and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our new session on the U.S. Civics course in the Government of the United States. Part 2 is on the executive branch. My name is Paul. I am the social studies instructor here at Penn Foster. Again, welcome. For those of you who don't know, a couple of great ways of being able to contact myself, the rest of the educational team. We have our phone number service, the 1-888-427-1000, and you can choose the option 5 is the instructor option, and that gets you right into the high school department where myself, our teaching assistants, and our instructors all very willing to help you out, be able to answer any questions you all have. You can also use the help and support page on your portal. You'll be able to just start typing in any question, and you do see an ask a question or contact us or / contact us appear as a new tab that you can create. You can use to create a new email. So by all means, let us know what questions you have so we can help you. We want to be able to assist you in your lessons, be able to assist you with whatever questions you have. So along with these, along with the webinars that we do continue to hold, and variety of courses, so please be sure to take a look at the webinar schedule as well as the live help sessions. Myself, our English instructors, our science, our math instructors are all holding different live help sessions as well as our webinars that you can come in and ask us any questions about your courses. So by all means, please contact us, reach out to us when you do have those questions. A lot of different ways available to be able to get help when you need to. This webinar session is being recorded, so you'll receive a recording in an email just like you did when you first registered for this webinar. That will provide a link to the recording. So you don't have to worry about memorizing anything. You don't have to worry about writing everything down. You will receive a recording with this, and you'll be able to email in related to this webinar as well. So feel free, like I said, lots of different ways to be able to contact myself and the rest of the educational staff. If you do have any questions as we go through the webinar, towards the end, I will be more than happy to answer any questions. So feel free to ask towards the end again. If you do have questions, just write them down, and then I'll be more than happy to answer those. So quick kind of update on what I hope to cover, what kinds of objectives we do have. I always like to start off my webinars with just kind of my best tips in terms of how to be successful within the course. We'll go over the responsibilities of the presidency, as well as the jobs of the vice president, and then the workings of the executive department as well as its agencies, and then be able to look at some of those more specific actions that go on inside the executive branch. So first off, just kind of a quick little, again, helpful hints in terms of what you want to do within your lesson. When you first open up your reading assignments within the course, you're always going to start off with reading over the objectives. And those are a great way of knowing exactly what myself, the instructors for the course, are really looking for you to know and be able to do. And I typically recommend take your notes as you're reading based on the objectives, because the objectives are what the self-checks, the reflect and respond questions, our discover more questions, all the practice exercises within the reading assignments, that's what those are based on, the objectives, as well as the exams. The exams are based on the objectives. So the better you understand the objectives, the more you understand what's in the study unit, the more, or the reading assignments, the better off you're going to do with the exam. And the exam is open book, so you can use your notes. If you have page references written in your notes as to where you want to look back at, by all means, use that material. Use those notes that you take, because that's going to help you be successful within your exams. So definitely keep these ideas in mind as you're moving through the lesson. And many of your lessons are going to be set up the exact same way. So keep these in mind. So we want to first talk about the responsibilities of the presidency. We talk about the presidency in such large terms, And it's always important to know, what exactly does what's the president supposed to do? What does the Constitution say the president's supposed to do? And kind of work from there. So within the Constitution, it first talks about the president having a 4-year term. Um, so that's first and foremost. And the 22nd Amendment is the First Amendment that really kind of focuses in on the idea of term limits. Up until the 22nd Amendment, which is passed in the 1950s, the president always had sort of what's called a precedent. And the precedent began back with George Washington, and that was that a president could serve a 4-year term and then a second 4-year term, so 8 years total, and then retire. So the presidency is only with one person for a maximum of 8 years. And this standard, this precedent, goes all the way until Franklin Roosevelt. And Franklin Roosevelt was president during a very tumultuous, very uneasy time. And so he actually runs and is elected president 4 times. He's elected in 1932 during the Great Depression. He's reelected in 1936 when people are continuing to be nervous but are still feeling better about the economy, so they want President Roosevelt to stay in office. And then he's reelected again in 1940. So for the first time ever, a third term for a president, Roosevelt's reelected, in part because of how well people are feeling about the economy and feel like the president has done a lot to improve the economy, but also looking at World War II, which at this time is destroying Europe, and the American people respond to Roosevelt saying that he wants to kind of continue to fix things at home, be able to fix our economy, and he's not going to get us involved in war. So he's reelected to a third term in 1940, and then in 1944, after we've now gone into war, we're part of the war of World War II, and Roosevelt decides to run for re-election for a 4th term. This is the closest election he has as president, and he gets reelected for that 4th term, and then shortly after that, within months, he dies in office, and his vice president becomes president, Harry Truman. But after that, the country and particularly the Congress comes to the point of saying, you know what? Yes, Roosevelt did a great job. Yes, he was popular, but really we shouldn't have a president be president this long. Even a popular president shouldn't stay in office for as long as Roosevelt did. So they created this 22nd Amendment that made the 2 terms limit. So since then, no president has been allowed by the Constitution to run for a second or for a 3rd term. Very few presidents would really were popular enough after 8 years to run for president again. Thinking about George W. Bush, even Barack Obama was still popular, but not as popular. Ronald Reagan the same way. So a lot of presidents are able to kind of get to that 2-term limit, and then typically Americans just start getting a little tired of the same president, get tired of the same political party in power. And so we almost have a natural way of saying, you know what, this president has stayed in office long enough for these 8 years. The pay of the president is set by the Congress. And another important distinction for the presidency is that it is elected by the Electoral College. So there was a lot of talk last year, and there's similarly there's talk back in 2000 as well, when the person who became president didn't actually win the popular vote. Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by, I believe, has now about 2 million votes, but Donald Trump won the most electoral votes. He won the majority of electoral votes within the Electoral College. So he became president, even though he didn't have the majority of votes. Same thing happened in 2000 when George W. Bush became president, even though Al Gore won the popular vote. But the presidency is set up in which the electoral college, the specific people are going to choose a president, even though those specific people typically vote for the same person who won the popular vote within the state. So even last year, after Donald Trump won the election, there were some electoral voters who thought about voting against him, not going with the popular vote within their state, but eventually did vote for the president. So Donald Trump became president officially after the Electoral College voted and made their official votes for the president. And this brings us to our first poll question. The president is elected by what? The popular vote, the electoral votes, or congressional approval? A lot of votes in, so I'll give you guys about another 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, thank you. So 100% correct, in which it's the electoral vote. So yes, the popular vote sets up the electoral vote, typically, and it's the popular vote of each state. So the state of Pennsylvania is going to decide how the electoral voters of Pennsylvania are going to vote. But in general, yes, it's not necessarily that popular vote. It's certainly not the whole popular vote. And congressional approval, that's actually another step in the electoral in the election of a president's process. So let's in the situation in which electoral voters decided not to vote for President Trump. This was sort of one of the scenarios that the Hillary Clinton team was hoping for, that enough electoral voters would choose not to vote for Donald Trump or just plain not vote, that the election would then move to the House of Representatives, in which the majority of the House would have to actually vote for the president. That did not happen. That's only actually happened once. After the Civil War, there was a very close election in now I'm going to forget the vote, or the year, 1876. In which Rutherford B. Hayes was actually elected by the House of Representatives as the new president, as part of a deal with between the Republicans and the Democrats of Congress, that Hayes would become the new Republican president, but the Democrats wanted Reconstruction in the South to end. So all federal officers, federal soldiers, were removed from the South after that election. So very nice job with that poll. So moving on to the responsibilities of the president, and what I wanted to do here is talk a little bit about what the reading assignments talk about in terms of the responsibilities of the president, but then sort of talk a little bit about what's happening today in terms of those same type of responsibilities. So the first one is the idea of the president enforcing laws passed by Congress. So the president informally, along with the majorities of the Congress, so in both the House of Representatives and the Senate, have majorities of Republicans and the same party as the president. So they are typically working well together in terms of setting their agenda. And their primary ones are setting up the budget, so how much the federal government is going to spend on different policies, as well as tax policies. And then the president has the ability to either sign or veto those different laws or those different bills that the Congress sends to the president. And so, for instance, We have a current issue today of a bill, so the bill going through the Congress, and then, for instance, we have the new healthcare law. And the House of Representatives last week the Republican majority voted for a new healthcare law, a new healthcare bill. Even though the president and the House Republicans did have a large gathering and various had a lot of celebration over the bill passing, there are still several steps left. The first one is that the Senate now has to make their bill, and many in the Senate have already said that they are going to take their time in creating a bill and getting it set up well. And both the Republicans and the Democrats in the Senate really have to work a little bit closely together in order to get a bill through the Senate. If you were with me the previous session for the government of the United States, the Senate, the House can really be run by the majority, that the majority party has a lot of power within the House. In the Senate, both parties, the minority party and the majority party, have to work together. The minority party, in this case, being the Democrats, the majority party being the Republicans, so they are working together on a bill. Once the bill passes the Senate, then both houses of Congress have to now kind of meet to make one bill between the two houses. And then both houses have to approve of that conference bill. The conference between the House and the Senate now has to be approved by both houses. And this will be an interesting step, because the House bill was considered very conservative, one that was written only by Republicans. The Senate bill will have to be worked on by both Democrats and Republicans. So how those two bills are going to work together and how both houses of Congress are going to approve of that new bill, it's going to be that will be sort of an interesting point of this process. The final step, if both houses of Congress approve that conference bill, then the president then receives that bill and is either going to approve of the bill by signing it, or he's going to reject it or veto it and send it back to the Congress for basically fixing the bill. Other responsibilities. The president does have the responsibilities of being the commander-in-chief, protecting the Americans, all Americans, and having the military under his civilian control, meaning that the Secretary of Defense, the leaders of each of the parts of the armed forces, so the Navy, the Army, the Air Force, Marines, each have a civilian, someone who's not part of the military, in charge. And as an example of this was a few weeks ago when the president ordered the strike on Syria and particularly its armed bases. And this was a part of the responsibility of the president, that he was able to make a decision based on the fact that he wanted to make sure that Americans were safe. And in his statements afterwards, he believed that he was doing that exact thing, that the chemical weapons, the biological weapons being used by the Syrians was a direct threat to America, a direct threat to our allies. And so that was partially why or the main reason why he made that strike, ordered that strike. And this is all part of the Congress's approval of any action against terrorist activities, going way back to the attacks on September 11, 2001. The Congress gave the presidency and the U.S. military a lot of authority in military actions. So this was just one of those aspects that the president was able to use that action, use that rule by Congress to have this attack on Syria. The president also has a lot of authority within foreign policy. He's able to direct his Department of State and his Secretary of State to be able to negotiate and create treaties with other countries, create agreements such as the Iranian nuclear deal. President Obama at the time had both his first Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, and then his second Secretary of State, John Kerry, negotiate this plan with Iran for it to abandon its nuclear weapons and for the U.S. to accept Iran more into the international community, be able to give the country aid, be able to give the country, be able to allow for trade with Iran. All of these new aspects that Iran was able to get from the international community by having this nuclear deal. And now it's up to President Trump, as he said, to decide if he wants to renegotiate parts of this deal, if he wants to change the deal completely. That is his right as the president, be able to have his State Department change policies or make new negotiations. The president also has the right of appointments. So at the very beginning of his administration, the president was able to appoint members of his executive team, be able to appoint his cabinet, so the secretaries of state, defense, education, this whole line were appointed by the president and then confirmed by the Senate. President Trump was also able to nominate a new justice of the Supreme Court. Justice Gorsuch was appointed by the president, was then approved by the Senate as part of, again, the president's responsibilities as president of the United States. Another aspect of the of presidential power in action are different executive orders. So when the president first became president, was inaugurated, he set up a number of executive orders. And typically the executive orders are really based on laws that have already been passed by Congress that the president is now making small changes to, or changing the direction in which the administration is handling or is enforcing the laws. One such law was, and directive on executive departments, I should say, as well. So in many cases, it's like a CEO directing his or her company. They're able to create policies and then tell their company, this is what we're now doing. These are the policies that we're going to implement. Think of when the president has had his first and now his second immigration ban and pause of immigration. The Department of Justice, his attorney general, says that the president has a right to set immigration policy. So the president was able to say, okay, we want to halt all immigration to certain countries and wants to reduce the amount of immigration in general into the United States. However, a number of states, as well as the American Civil Liberties Union, or the ACLU, are suing the federal government, are suing the president, saying that this immigration ban is a burden on states. They're not able to get the best qualified people to come to their state, not able to come to their businesses. The ACLU has also claimed that this ban is against the First Amendment. That because the president had said publicly when he was campaigning to become president, that he wanted a Muslim ban on of all Muslims coming to the United States, that this immigration ban, this executive order, was against the Establishment Clause, which is part of the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which is covered. We write about this a lot in the U.S. Constitution lesson, the second lesson in this U.S. Civics course, in which the federal government cannot establish one religion over another, or favor one religion or not favor another religion. And so the ACLU and other civil liberties groups believe that the president is actually establishing that Islam is not a good religion, is not the correct religion, and so it's against the First Amendment of the Constitution. So these are several debates that are going on now. Certainly others are going on, and certainly these rules and these executive orders are not going to end quickly. It's going through the court system, especially this one itself is going through the court system and will likely end up at the Supreme Court probably in the next either months or the next year or so. The final thing I want to talk about is other officials within the executive branch. The first one is the vice president, and really the big thing for the vice presidency is that the power and the importance of the president or of the vice president is based on the administration. For the last several vice presidents, Mike Pence currently, Joe Biden before him, and even Dick Cheney and Al Gore previously, have all been some of the more powerful vice presidents and more influential vice presidents in American history. And most of that is because it's up to the president to actually make the vice president important. The vice president himself is not an important position, or the vice presidency itself is not an important position. In terms of constitutional authority, there are two things that the vice president is supposed to do. The first is to preside over the Senate. So anytime that the vice president wants to, they can preside over the Senate. Typically, the only time they do that is when there is a tie between the 100 senators. So if there's a 50-50 tie. That happened recently when the Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, was up for confirmation. Two Republican senators rejected her, and so it became a 50-50 tie. And so the Vice President, Mike Pence, went to preside over the Senate and casted the tie-breaking vote, making it 51-50 that Secretary DeVos became the Secretary of Education. The other constitutional authority of the vice president is to take over as president if the president is not able to. We've had several instances in which the president has died in office, as well as Richard Nixon, who had to resign from the presidency, and his vice president became president after that. As I mentioned, the power has grown in recent vice presidents, really starting with Al Gore as Bill Clinton's vice president. All of the previous vice presidents have been pretty significant, that they've had either policies that they've led, that they have been very vocal for the presidency or for the executive branch. So we've seen that, and we're currently seeing that now with Mike Pence being a pretty influential vice president as well. In terms of the executive departments and agencies, the cabinet secretaries are all of the major advisors for the president. Secretaries of State, Defense, as I mentioned, the Secretary of Education. All these secretaries, all the cabinet secretaries, heads of the executive departments. The agencies that are under the departments as well have specific duties, have specific responsibilities to carry out, and they all either carry out regulations, they enforce rules, they enforce laws, that they are all part of this executive branch. And that brings us to our final poll question. The vice president has blank of constitutional power. Is it no constitutional power, little constitutional power, or a lot of constitutional power? So how much power does the vice president have? A lot of votes in, so give you guys another 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, thank you. So the majority of you are correct that the vice president has little constitutional power. It is really based on what the president wants the vice president to do. And as I said, recently, a lot of vice presidents have had a lot of power. early on, so John Adams as the first vice president had very little power, had no power really. George Washington would actually have John Adams leave meetings because the president did not want him really in the meetings anymore, particularly cabinet official meetings. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you all have.